Tonight, we have 4 stories, from strangers to a skin transplant gone wrong, and more. A huge thank you to the generous authors who have allowed me to share these stories with all of you. Please be sure to drop a like and comment if you enjoy. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. I post new videos all the time. Also, I need your help with something. So I've been working on a best of 2020 video. Basically, I'll be putting the best 25 stories from the year in one video for you guys. I've worked especially hard this year on quality control, meaning I only upload stories that I think are genuinely good, which is a good thing of course, but it makes it really difficult setting aside only 25 stories. So to get all of you involved, I thought it'd be fun if I asked you guys what your favorite stories from the year are. I'll be seriously considering any that are commented. Also, it would just be cool to know what kinds of stories you guys enjoy so I can look for more of them in the future. I'm sorry if this was long-winded, but my brain has been on overload putting the video together, so any help would be greatly appreciated. Anyway, enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I live in an apartment on the 5th floor. The whole building is 9 stories tall. This means I am right in the middle, which has its drawbacks. On one hand, you would definitely die if you were to fall off the balcony, or jump. On the other hand, you have a fantastic view over a small back street, and across the street, a boring office building. How exciting. My bed is right next to my bedroom window, which I often have open when it gets too warm in my room. This means I sometimes have a hard time falling asleep because of all the noise coming from the street. It's usually some drunks passing through my street when going from one bar to another, and making a lot of noise in the process. And when this happens, I usually spy on the people in the street with my binoculars. Sometimes it can be very interesting to see who or what the sounds are coming from. I don't really feel bad for doing it, because after all, they had awoken me from my slumber. One night I heard loud laughing coming from outside. I pulled up my curtains just enough so that I could peek through the opening with my binoculars. I looked down at the street. It was completely empty. No wonder, I thought. It was late on a regular weekday. Not many people were partying, but I still wondered where the laughter had come from. And then I saw it. 3 men were standing on a balcony on the office building across the street. The balcony was almost the same height as my bedroom window. The 3 men looked very much alike. They were middle-aged, with black suits and receding hairlines. They were all smoking cigars. They seemed to be enjoying themselves, not discussing anything work-related, although I couldn't hear what they were saying. It was pretty unusual to see people in the office building at nighttime. I figured they would probably go home soon and I would be able to get some sleep. And just as I thought, they left. At least 2 of them. The last man just stood there on the balcony. I took a closer look at him with my binoculars. He now had a very serious expression on his face, and he was squinting his eyes, as if he was looking at something far away, but I couldn't figure out what. His view must have been blocked by the house I lived in, and there was nothing particularly interesting about the building. Then a horrible thought popped up in my head. Was he looking at me? No. He couldn't even see me. Or could he? Then he did something that confirmed my theory. He smiled and waved at me. My heartbeat raised. I felt embarrassed and also a little frightened. It wasn't a friendly wave. It was as if he was saying, "I can see you. I know where you are." I quickly pulled down the curtain, put away my binoculars. I crawled up in a ball and hid under my covers like a small child. A few minutes passed. It was dead quiet, but I still couldn't sleep. I was trying to process what had just happened. How could he have seen me? What was he going to do now? Suddenly my thought process was interrupted by a loud metallic bang coming from the street, followed by a car alarm going off. I didn't want to look, but I know I had to. Once again, I slowly pulled up the curtains a little. The first thing I noticed when looking out at the street was a blinking car on the other side of the street, and on top of it laid a seemingly lifeless body. I felt chills down my spine. The balcony on the office building was now empty, and so was the rest of the street. I took a closer look at the spectacle through my binoculars. The body on the car's roof belonged to a man with a black suit. The man that had waved at me. His limbs were in very unnatural positions. It seemed like most of his bones were broken. There was blood everywhere. I came to the terrifying conclusion that he must have jumped from the balcony. But why would he do that? Then something even more terrifying happened. The seemingly lifeless man started moving. He stood up, blood dripping out of his mouth. But he didn't stand on his broken legs. He couldn't. It was more like some invisible force was pulling him. Then he was dragged down from the car's roof and started moving across the street, his legs slithering on the concrete, leaving a bloody trail behind. I knew he was getting closer to my house, which made me very uncomfortable. I hid under my covers again, scared for my life, and somehow I fell asleep. I woke up the next morning, and I had almost forgotten about my terrifying experience the night before. I pulled up the curtains and saw 4 words written in blood on the outside of my window. Don't spy on strangers. I want to make something clear. I am not your typical motorcycle guy. In fact, most of them will probably not consider me as one, since my vehicle runs on electricity. So please don't picture me with a badass leather jacket, tattoos, a massive six-pack, and being loud in the neighborhood in the evening. For a fact, all I use it for is to get to my work and back to my flat. Fast and cheap, good for shorter distances and the environment. I know there is a stereotype about how dangerous riding a motorcycle is and how reckless their owners can get. Accidents happen and we should not discriminate people involved based on the type of their locomotion. A such accident happened to me 2 months ago. The weather was rainy, the streets were busy, and the intersection tricky for outsiders. From what I can recall, I was about to cross on the green light when a car hit me. I flew a few meters onto the slippery asphalt, losing my consciousness. Next thing I knew, I'm in a city hospital. Apparently, I was asleep for 3 days. To fill the gap between the events, I was told that my raincoat was ripped apart. That helped, since the left side of my back was so devastated. If I had it not, my bones would surely get exposed, and my muscles would have been severely injured. I was told that a skin graft was required, but relocation was not possible, since the wound was too wide and my body too skinny to get enough tissue. That is why they used a donor transplant. They showed me the raincoat, or rather what was left of it. The hole was so big, I could crawl through it. Luckily for me, the guy that hit me had no excuses and was found guilty of the accident, so the surgery was paid for by his insurance company. I have to admit that it all made me very confused. After my doctor allowed me to sit down, I gently touched my back. I felt the stitches, but I have to admit, they patched me up quite good. I got on a medical leave from my work, kept in touch with my doctor, and spent the next few days in the comfort of my house with a huge insurance pay to recompensate what happened. It took me some time to accept how my back looked like. First, I wanted to avoid looking at myself and thinking about it too much, but with time I started to accept what happened. After shower, I spent time examining my scar. I knew that with time it will look better. The stitches were the worst part, but after I would get them removed, things would be less noticeable. After further examination, I noticed that the part of my skin which was transplanted had an odd shade. It matched my own enough to hide the differences, but if I was to point it out to someone, they would see it. It also felt a bit smoother than mine. I hope this would not have any negative impact on my life, but God, was I wrong. A week after the surgery, I felt pain on my backside. As it turned out, it started swelling. I immediately got an appointment to the doctor. He was supposed to remove my stitches soon, but gave me some bad news. There was a great chance that the transplant was rejected by my body. He did some tests, gave me some stronger medicine, which weakened my immune system and forced the body to accept the transplanted tissue. I went back to my house with a big headache. I started observing this part of my body from a mirror more often. Small blisters started showing up, the swelling continued, and then I noticed something that I missed before. There was a mark, a 7-segment type set of digits. Very vague and small, almost impossible to notice. I shivered with confusion. How did it get there? Donors with tattoos are rejected immediately, right? I thought as I went to my room to try and make a picture of it. I opened up my laptop and enhanced the contrast. It was there. No doubt on that. Invisible at first, but clear after your body understood what it was looking at. I was very nervous and it was late. Very late, in fact. So I decided that calling my doctor was pointless. I opened an internet forum, posted the picture, and marked my question as urgent. Someone must have had any insight about it. Surely if it was made by a machine, then the code must hide some importance to the people who designed it. As I woke up, the pain was even worse. I felt as if I was burning inside. The wound was swollen, and it felt as if it was going to rip out itself from me at any minute. That was not what woke me up, though. I was woken by a call from the doctor. I hoped that he could tell me what was happening. "We have to take you to the hospital right now. I will call you an ambulance," he said, with a panic in his voice. "There was a mistake. Your blood type is O+. That is why we have been careful with our donor databank. For some reason, our test shows that your transplant does not match O+, but it did before." I was frozen solid. I instantly felt a great disgust to what was attached to me, one that I simply cannot describe. It was very unsettling. The skin just felt very foreign and alien at that moment. I sat on my bed, waiting for medical staff to arrive, and then suddenly it stopped. All of it. My body felt no pain. I touched myself there. The swelling decreased and blisters disappeared. It was smooth again. When medical staff arrived, they were just as confused as I was. They took me to the hospital and decided to test me anyway. The doctor did some testing, took my blood again, O+, as expected. Everything fitted together like it was all just a dream. They were baffled about what happened, but in the end, they let me go. Apparently, I might have had not enough medication for my body to fully accept the transplant. Slow metabolic response or a rare genetic immunity. They were not sure. The mark that I spotted the other day might have been a cause of the infection, but as to its origin, my doctor had no idea. I was asked if I wanted that part of my skin removed and searched for another donor, or a cut of my own. But I neglected the idea. I had enough of staying in the hospital. After an argument on if he should, the doctor agreed to give me information about the hospital that had the tissue of the original owner. It all made me very nervous as I hate complications, but I needed answers. I still was not over the accident, which left me in a very bad condition, and I just wanted to have a normal, quiet, uneventful life. I suppose everyone does, though. I decided to make a trip next week and ask the donor service about the mark. Then I noticed that I completely forgot about the post I created. I turned up my laptop and opened the forum. My post was quite active. People were apparently angry that I left it hanging. There was a discussion and a person seemed to have a possible answer. One user was a ranch farmer. He said that animals are marked similarly, but with less code. The first 3 digits were, as he stated, related to a specific facility, batch, and number, and the next 8 were the date of birth. He was unsure about the rest, but he pointed out that not only slaughterhouse animals are marked that way. Endangered species, found pets, and special breeds also had such inking. People started pointing out that I probably got a pig transplant, a common practice where genetically modified pigs are harvested for skin. But I talked about it with my doctor and he gave me the documents on who I had my transplant from. Mark Gilver Offesh. Died in 2016 on September. Age 45. Fell off when hiking. The dates didn't match, and even so, it would be impossible. The date on the marking displayed August 5th, 1968. No pig could live that long and have had its skin still intact. I had enough. I took my keys, grabbed my jacket, closed the door behind me. The small clinic that ran the donor service was strangely far from the town. It took me a good few hours to get there, and it was getting a bit late. The building was placed seemingly nowhere, on a big, wild field of tall grass. I left my car on a parking lot and entered the building. The small reception was mostly empty, except for a nurse behind the counter. She was a little surprised at first, stating that she has no marked appointments for today, but after a quick chat, she calmed down. Apparently there was a reason behind the remote location of the hospital, and having little to no patients. The facility was only a few minutes off the main road, officially to help in car accidents that happen there from time to time, but unofficially, the department has a great accommodation for urgent organs transplant. Or to put it simply, they can easily acquire organs if the car crash was fatal and deliver them quickly using the nearby highway. I told her about my case, and sure enough, she called a doctor who asked me to follow him. He brought me to his office and asked me how he could help. After a short conversation, he started looking into the files. It took him some time, but eventually he stood up, asked me to wait, and left the room. He came back after a decent delay with another doctor, clearly uneasy about what happened. "I'm sorry," he said with a serious and concerned tone, "but there must have been a mistake. We have data on your surgery, and we found and concluded that we indeed sent you a tissue from Mr. Mark Afesh. The problem is that after further investigation, we found out that this donor never had his skin collected." I stood shocked and yelled for answers. I really, really hate complications. I try to be a quiet person, but at that moment, I was ready to sue the hell out of this clinic and everybody involved. If it was not for the need of answers, I would have left immediately. After checking in our storage and data bank, we can say that the donor only agreed for bone and marrow extraction, and furthermore, he was not of Caucasian origins and would not even remotely fit the skin tone. I reacted very aggressively, and I made quite a big scene, which I will spare for you. My back, for some reason, was shivering and my whole body felt uneasy. I came to an agreement that they will search their data bank for a possible match, and in return, I will have time to contact my lawyer if I wish to put it into a police investigation. I left the building shortly, still shaking. The first thing I wanted to do was to order a transplant removal and get that out of my body. Pig skin, human donor. I did not care at that moment. I turned on my car and rode out of the parking lot. I have to admit that I was a little paranoid at that moment, and it was getting late, but what happened next was undoubtedly real and not just my imagination. There was a person in the middle of the field, hiding next to the road. I use the term person very broadly. The hooded figure was wearing old, dirty, frayed clothes and was quite tall. It stared right at me. I had no idea how to react, but I did as I usually act near strangers. I simply tried to ignore it. I was pissing my pants as I passed it with my car. It was too far in the grass and too little sun left to see its face, and yet I was sure that it stared right at me, a few meters away. I felt an uneasy hesitation in its appearance, and just the way it acted made me glad I had my windows closed. In a second, it shuddered violently. Realizing I am seeing it, and after a small pause, it immediately ran away, moving crookedly and bending abnormally, disappearing in the tall, dark brush. I was so focused on it. For a moment, I forgot all the context of why I came here in the first place. As my mind cleared from the fear and the feel of being watched, I realized something. The clothes it had, despite years of usage, dirt, and all the damage to hide it, it was a medical apparel. Nobody comes here. There was nothing special about me for it to focus on. That thing knew. I didn't know what was the right reaction at that moment. I snapped, these words drumming in my brain as I left the car and run into the grass. It ran fast and I had no way of catching up with it, but I was sure it ran away. The way it moved, it had left deep footsteps, one misshapen, hard to recognize, but the other one was surely from a strangely placed, loosely put rubber shoe. The grass was also broken, revealing the patch it made. I felt itching from all the weeds around me on my back as I ran in a fury. It took a good 100 meters through the field, and then through the small forest. It was getting late, and looking back, I have no idea what made me go there, other than the need for answers. I finally stopped. There was no more broken twigs, grass, or footprints for me to follow, but that was not why I stopped. I knew exactly where it went, among the dark trees, in a last scarce ray of sunlight. I saw a massive wreck, an empty husk of an old, big building, rows of broken windows, a big entrance with no doors, long dark halls behind it, the ground floor destroyed with big holes, a set of stairs with missing steps, leading underground, broken fence wires, mostly laying on the ground, wide sections, wings of crumbling concrete, leaving only hollow frames and exposing, decomposing old furnitures. Not a single sound, bird or insect was present. I expected a stupid teenager in his parents' house, perhaps a black market or a body part scammer. That's what I was remotely ready to expect. The escaping creature made me think that I was danger to it. It was then that I realized how stupid I was. I did not see the creature at first. I heard it. A scratching sound. Next to the big concrete entrance behind the pillar in a shadow. Scratch, 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 and then suddenly, a slap on the floor. I almost vomited when I saw it. A bunch of skin flaps, tossed around the broken, covered in moss floor tiles, next to a cracked pillar of concrete. My eyes were expecting it to be next to them, and sure enough it was. 3 meters above. I could almost not see it at all, but the shape that made it was far remote from what I saw on the road. It was violently rubbing itself against the ceiling. It was not attached to the ground below either. Long shadows spread across the hall, grabbing onto walls and floor far away. Suddenly I felt it. It noticed me, and part of it turned around and stayed still in a grave silence. I was far from it, but I stopped breathing instantly. My heart was beating slowly, and I felt my legs melting. I made one big step for humankind backwards, towards where I came from, trying not to shit myself. Second step. When will it move? Third step. God, I'm dead. A sound of a breaking twig under my foot, and not a thought more. I was frozen in time, in place and in my mind, looking at my death, shell-shocked by the sound I made, vibrating in the air. I have no idea if it was a second or a minute. I stood still, more still than a dead man can, my body begging me to breathe. I can without hesitation say that the bravest thing I did was running away. I don't even remotely consider it funny, as my last clear thought was, run. I looked away behind me for the last time before hiding in the grass from which I had come from. The creature stayed in the shadows, not moving a centimeter. I don't care about the hospital. I don't want to know how I got this thing in me. I am not contacting anyone. I am never going back there again. Neither I am encouraging anyone, including the police, to try and find out anything about what I saw. I feel itchy. All I ever wanted was to get this thing out of my body. I know now why it has not attacked me. I could create 1,000 questions, but for my sanity, I throw them away every time. I know why the transplant rejected at first. I wanted to get it out as soon as I drove my car back and opened my door to my home. I know what will happen if I do. I can't do it, and for what happens to me next, there is no coming back. It does not even matter what I saw in the forest. I got info from the hospital. They informed me that all their samples had pieces of skin in them. Some are a few years old. It was a matter of time, and I was the only one who got the part with its code. That's why I noticed. This is why I have to warn others. They have no idea. I looked in the mirror an hour ago. It grows.
Riley, I need you to do this for me, please.
My Aunt Jerry begged on the phone. You ask me to do this every year, and every year I refuse. What makes you think this year is any different? I questioned her.
It's my last year. I have to win. You know old Carrie Wheeler has some dirty trick up her sleeve. I just need you to find out what.
She said. Every year, Aunt Jerry participated in the pumpkin growing contest in Byron County. Every year, she gets beat by Miss Wheeler. She always asks me to figure out how she's growing her pumpkins so large. Normally, Miss Wheeler had to hire a crew to lift hers into the back of a pickup. Aunt Jerry can only get hers to grow big enough that she has to put it in the backseat of her truck. They've been at it for 50 years, and each year, Miss Wheeler has won. Ever since I started in the PI business, she's been begging me to snoop. You know I could lose my job, I questioned.
No, you won't. You're the best they have.
She sighed. She was feeding my ego, and unfortunately, I couldn't say no. Fine, I'll see what I can do, I told her.
Thank you, dear. Now I have to go. Martha's here to help me with the cats.
I'd like to say I know it's illegal that I chose to spy on Miss Wheeler, but you have to admit, it's very strange that she's won for 46 years straight. Mr. Wheeler moved several states away, and, while they're still married, they live very separate lives. I parked an undercover car down the road from Miss Wheeler's farm and set up with some binoculars in the tree outside her farm. She fortunately lived on the outskirts of town, and I could use the trees and vegetation as cover. I could see her pumpkin already, and it was 3 times the size of Aunt Jerry's. I watched Miss Wheeler come out and measure the pumpkin. She inspected it while talking to it. I saw her drag a trash bag out of the shed as well as some gardening tools. Nothing special so far. Maybe the ground was just more fertile. The hole she dug was shallow, and once it got near the roots of the pumpkin, she carefully dug around them. She sprinkled something in the ground, and I made a mental note to see what it was. I watched as she started to pull something out of the ground. I dropped my binoculars when I saw what it was. She pulled a human skull out of the ground. From a trash bag, I saw her produce a human arm and place it in the ground. She covered it up before dragging the bag back to the shed and washing off her tools and hands. I must have been seeing things, right? When she was in the house and I felt it was safe, I ran over to the pumpkin. I dug around until I found what I was looking for. A finger was protruding out of the ground. She fertilizes her pumpkins with human flesh. I still couldn't believe it, and ran toward the shed. Before I opened the door, the smell of death hit me. I grabbed the trash bag and opened it. Staring back at me was a half-human skull, with half its now gelatinous brain leaking out. An alarm started going off in the shed. Shit. I looked on the wall and noticed a keypad. You must have to enter a code to keep the alarm from going off. I heard her back door start to open and also heard a gunshot. She may be old, but she can still shoot. Get away, you devil, she yelled. I ran back through the trees as a shot hit my arm. I kept running until I felt it was safe. I cut a strip off my shirt and used it as a makeshift tourniquet. I didn't stop moving until I made it back to my car. I drove until I made it far enough away from her farm that I felt safe. I examined the damage on my arm. Just a graze, although it would require some stitches. It would heal as long as I kept it clean. The hospital was unnecessary. I drove straight to Aunt Jerry's door, where I banged on the door like a maniac until she opened it. Riley, what's wrong? She asked. Body parts. She fertilizes her pumpkins with body parts. I told her. What? Come in. Come inside, Aunt Jerry commanded. I walked inside and went straight to the fridge where I knew she kept the vodka. I poured myself a glass and drained it before she made her way to sit at the kitchen table. I took my jacket and shirt off so I could see the full extent. I brought my first aid kit and went straight to stitching once the vodka hit. I've never been more blessed to be a lightweight. Tell me everything, she said. I told her. I told her I hid in a nearby tree with binoculars. I told her I watched her dig a hole and pull out a skull only to replace it with an arm. I told her about the gun. Aunt Jerry only laughed. That fool. She may be younger than me, but she won't win this year, she told me. I have to report her, I said. Aunt Jerry grabbed my hand and patted it. I don't think you do, dear, she said. I stared at her, bewildered. Yes, I do. This is bigger than your stupid pumpkin competition, I yelled. What are you going to say? You used your work knowledge to spy on the old lady for personal gain? You'll lose the job you worked so hard for, she said. I'll leave that part out. She shook her head. I'll tell them. I'll tell them you did it for your own accord with no legal reason behind it, she warned. I finished sewing up my wound and slammed the needle down. Why would you do that? Are you crazy? I wanted answers, and she would give them to me. I have been doing this for 50 years, and each year, I'm bested by her. I know her dirty secret, and I plan to use it. She said. You can't. It's illegal. Taking from the dead is not if people don't know. I'm sure you have access to the morgue. I need you to grab whatever you can so we can speed this up. She said. I'll not. You will, or your career is over. You work so hard, push through so much sexism, and gosh, I'd hate to see you throw that away. I'll tell them you confessed to getting the bodies for her and tried to kill me, her biggest competition. She threatened. I had no choice. I had to go through with it. I would not let this be the end of my career. The next Thursday, I was to deliver Aunt Jerry a body. She thought a whole body would be enough to catch up to Miss Wheeler. On Wednesday, I snuck out to the graveyard. Taking a body from the morgue would be too difficult. Too many cameras, and I would have to use my access card to get in. Instead, I drove out to the local cemetery. There was a funeral that morning, and Aunt Jerry said the fresher the better. I got to work digging up the dirt. I was so focused I didn't see the light coming towards me or hear the man shouting. I only knew someone was there when he pushed me from behind. What are you doing? Keep your hands where I can see them. He commanded. Please, I need you to turn a blind eye. Just this once. I begged. Yeah, right. I'm calling the cops, he said, grabbing his phone. I panicked. I hit him with my shovel. I kept hitting until his head was a bloody pulp. It wasn't until his brain was splattered all over the place that I stopped. I panicked. I drug him to my car and tossed him in the back of it. I got in my seat and steeled my nerves. I had to get it together. I was an investigator. I could remove the evidence. I grabbed a trash bag and dug up the bloody earth. I took it with me. Unfortunately, crime doesn't stop, and a call came in. I jumped when my phone rang. It's Riley, I said as calmly as possible.
We have a job for you. Woman called and said she's willing to pay whatever we want for us to figure out who was spying on her.
My boss said. Is there anyone else available? I prayed someone was available.
No, she requested you. Get out there. The address is Washington Avenue. Report back what you find.
Ice hit my veins. That was Miss Wheeler's address. My arm wasn't healed completely and was starting to leak goo. I may be going crazy, but it smelled like pumpkin. I had to get this job done. Can I have her phone number? I'm under the weather right now. I'll get out to her place soon, I assured her.
Fine. It's 0911. Don't screw this up.
I still had a body in my car. I had to take care of this. I punched in her number and heard the dial tone before her sweet voice hit.
Wheeler Farms.
She answered. Hello. My name is Riley. I'm the PI assigned to your case. What can I do for you?
Oh, Riley Owens. Gertrude's adopted niece? What a coincidence. Someone was, nosing around my award-winning pumpkins. I want you lovely folk to find out who did it.
Do you have any suspicions?
Yeah, your aunt. There's also Miss Williams, who has tried to find out my secret formula, but she can't even beat your aunt.
She gave a short laugh. Okay, I'll be over to your farm in a few days to inspect the scene. This is my number I'm calling from. Give me a call if you think of anything.
I will, dear. Thank you.
I took another breath. It was time to end this with Aunt Jerry. I drove the groundskeeper to Aunt Jerry's house. I rang the doorbell and heard her feet shuffling over. Riley, did you get the package? She asked. Yeah, can I be done now? I was panicking again. Oh, you need to put him in the ground, but be careful of the roots, she warned. No, I brought the body. Our deal is over. She reached for the phone. Sure would be a shame if I called in a report that my dear niece snapped from the pressure of her job and stole a body, right? She was already dialing 911. Stop. I'll handle it. I was a very unwilling party. She told me to drive over to the pumpkin patch and dig a hole for the body. I did. I dragged him out of the trunk of my car and pushed him in the hole. I threw up once. Aunt Jerry just said it's more nutrients for the pumpkin. I covered the body and could now pretend nothing happened. I lit a fire in Aunt Jerry's backyard and burned my clothes, the wooden handle of the shovel, and attempted to burn my tarp. Aunt Jerry let me wear one of her nightgowns home. I told her to please never contact me again. I cleaned up in the shower and also used a bit of bleach. Hoping to put this all behind me, I went to bed. My arm was looking better. Still oozing pumpkin juice, but better. I arrived at Miss Wheeler's house 2 days later and knocked on her door. She popped her little head out of it. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Hi, I'm P.I. Owens. We spoke on the phone," I said, reaching out to shake her hand. "Ah, yes, hello. The situation has been handled. I'll still pay. Have a good day," she said as she slammed the door in my face. I called my boss, who gave me my next assignment. On the way to my car, I thought I saw Miss Williams' car round back, but Miss Wheeler could have just gotten a new car, right? Besides, I didn't want to be around her any longer than necessary. I really thought this was over when I walked away. A week before the competition, Aunt Jerry tried to contact me. She said it was an emergency and I needed to come see her, as it may be my last chance. I, being dumb and gullible, drove straight to her house. She was on the front porch, rocking in her swing. "Riley, how nice of you to join me," she said. "Thought you were dying." "I am, just not as quickly as you thought. Come inside, let's talk." She hopped off the swing and went inside. I foolishly followed. "What do you want?" I asked. "Oh dear. Remember those cameras I had installed around the farm? Look what they caught," she said in a sing-song voice. She pulled up a video on her tablet, and on it was me, digging the hole, burying the body. I tightened my grip on the video. "What do you want?" I asked one last time. "I think I can give that Wheeler bitch competition, but I need more of that fertilizer. You understand what I'm asking, right?" "Of course." "Good girl. Go do it," she said. "Can I use your tarp? Mine was thrown into the fire from last time." "Of course, dear. There's one in the shed." I retrieved the tarp and a machete from the shed. My actions were not my own. I needed to free myself. I worked so many trash part-time jobs to get where I am today. No one will take it away from me. I walked back inside and into the kitchen where Aunt Jerry was on the chair. "What are you doing, dear?" she asked. "What I should have done that night," I said. I pushed her out of the chair and onto the floor. She can't get up on her own and kept asking me what I was doing and why I would do this. I didn't listen. It took a few cuts and some stabs, but eventually she stopped screaming. "I'll win this damn competition for you. It's only right to use it with your blood to win," I told her dead body. I dragged her outside and made quick work of putting her on the other side of the pumpkin and disposing of the evidence. I came back by every day to put her special concoction of fertilizer on the roots and water it. The pumpkin grew to triple its size. A week passed and the day of the competition was upon us. The pumpkin was so large I had to hire help to move it. The only problem was I had to move the bodies first. The roots of the pumpkin were rooted in each body, and each body smelled awful. I dragged them out of the ground and threw them in the wood pile before I set it ablaze. "Are you proud now, Aunt Jerry?" I mocked. The nice boys from town brought a trailer, and a small horde of scrawny boys that managed to lift the pumpkin on the trailer. They made quick work of getting the pumpkin there safely and unloading it in Aunt Jerry's spot. Miss Wheeler walked up to me when she saw me standing next to the pumpkin. "Riley Owens, where's your aunt?" Miss Wheeler said. "Feeling under the weather. The rules say family can stand in for family. Your pumpkin looks good," I complimented. "So does yours. Best of luck, sweetie," she said. She walked back to hers. The judges let a few special kids draw a face on the pumpkins. Some kid drew an angry face on mine. The competition began as soon as the last kid was done. "Welcome to the 266th Annual Pumpkin Competition. I'm Mayor Reynolds. We've got several competitors, but I think we can clearly point out the front runners. I'd also like to take this time to let you all know the police are here. If any of you have any information on the disappearance of Miss Williams, please let us know. The cops are still tirelessly looking for her." My blood ran cold again. Could Miss Wheeler have assumed it was her snooping on the farm that day and gotten revenge? Is that why she was so quick to shut the door? Maybe it was really Miss Williams' car I saw that day. I glanced over, and she had no look of remorse on her face. Mayor Reynolds continued. "Let's cut right to it. Miss Gertrude's niece is here to fill in for her. She's not in the best health these days. Let's get down to weighing these monsters," he announced. They put Miss Wheeler's pumpkin on the scale. 76.82 pounds for our reigning champ. One day we'll find out her secret. Next up, what did you say your name was, sweetie? He asked. Riley. Riley Owens. Miss Riley Owens. They moved Miss Wheeler's pumpkin off the scale and placed mine dead center. The angry face stared me down. I watched the scale with anticipation. 63.98. So sorry, my dear, but Miss Wheeler is the winner, she announced. This couldn't be. I worked so hard for this. I sacrificed a lot. I have nightmares every night because of this stupid pumpkin competition. I swear my bullet wound is still leaking pumpkin juice. You sacrificed so much and you still lost. I knew my sister should have never adopted you, the voice said. I looked at the pumpkin and could have sworn it was talking. It's me, dear. Your dear old aunt who loved you so much. Now, I never have to leave you. We can be together forever. Aunt Jerry's voice said. I lost it. I grabbed a sledgehammer and attacked the pumpkin. The whole time, Aunt Jerry was taunting me, telling me I was worth nothing and that she should have disowned me years ago. The pumpkin smelled just like Aunt Jerry. I could have sworn she possessed this pumpkin. Security came and dragged me away from it. Miss Wheeler came up to see me. Are you okay? She asked. No, you murderer. I'm not. I spat. I ran out of there. I ran to my car in the parking lot. I went to Aunt Jerry's house and went out back. All the pumpkins seemed to have her voice. Riley, look at me, one pumpkin said. How does it feel to be a murderer? Another asked. I grabbed a sledgehammer and went to work smashing each pumpkin. I made it to the last one. You got anything to say to me? I asked. I was just trying to do my job, said the voice of the groundskeeper. I'm so sorry. She made me, I told him. The pumpkin formed his face. You had a choice, and you chose selfishly. You will never be forgiven, he said. He kept spewing hate until I smashed him too. I grabbed whatever flammable liquids I could find and drenched Aunt Jerry's house as well as the pumpkins and watched it burn. I threw my phone, ID, and anything that could track me in there. I walked away and never looked back. It's been years. I moved on. I changed my name and move often. I'm wanted in that small town for the murder of my aunt. I heard Miss Wheeler passed away a few years ago. Still undefeated in the pumpkin growing contest. The police found her dead and leaking pumpkin guys from her wounds. They found human and animal remains in her basement. I carry around a load of guilt. If I had reported her, could I have saved her victims? Probably not. It's been enough years and I'm tired. I still can't look at pumpkins. I swear they talk. Recently, I cut myself and I swear pumpkin seeds came out. I can't do this anymore. The people deserve the truth. It's time to go home. Across the opaque, emotionless TV screen, bright bolded words read out. Danger. Emergency weather alert. Ice storm warning at 8:30 p.m. Stay indoors. Stay safe. The sound system exploded in a disturbing succession of beeps and drills. I closed my eyes and plugged my ears up silently. The room we were in was shrouded in darkness anyway, so I would assume Duncan wouldn't see me. I really hated those emergency alert warnings. It's always reminded me of alien invasions in movies and stuff. I always know that those stories aren't true, but they make me feel uneasy. Nonetheless, I plugged my ears until the warning went away. I focused on Duncan. He was staring straight into the TV. The glow of the light reflecting onto our faces illuminated his figure, though his face was still covered in shadow. Man, looks like a snowstorm, Duncan added. He checked his phone, and finally, his face was barely visible in the shadow of the room. It looked familiar and recognizable. I had known him for years after all. We were trying to watch a movie in my room, but considering the fact that it had been snowing pretty hard for a while, the internet was unreliable, so that idea was a bust. I opened up my phone to call my mom again. I let it ring for a minute. No signal, I said out loud. I'm getting a little concerned about my mom, I told Duncan. He furrowed his brow and sat up from his lying position on the couch. Well, I wouldn't be so serious about it, he replied. The ice storm is at 8, and we got like 2 hours before that comes up. Plus, she just needed to get to the store. I nodded silently and stood up with him. The television was now on the fritz. It blinked into a white screen, illuminating Duncan and me. I think the ice storm did a number on it, so it was the perfect ending to a perfect day. Want to head downstairs and play Monopoly or something? Duncan suggested. Yeah, let's go. We were awash with sickly yellow light in the living room. Mom had intended to get those bulbs replaced, but she never had the time. We couldn't find the Monopoly board, so we were just sitting around trying to find a way to kill time. I looked outside to see the snow filling up the lawn. The snowflakes looked bigger than usual. They clumped up together into piles on the frozen ground. The light of our living room was just barely able to illuminate the entire lawn. Stopping in the woods, where the tree line blocked the light from penetrating into the wilderness beyond. It may have just been me, but I could swear I saw movement near the edge of the woods. I saw a pair of weathered antlers poke through the brush. Whoa, I said. What? Duncan said back. That's a crazy looking deer. What happened to him? Duncan walked up to me and peered at the forest. As he spoke, the antlers turned into a corpse of a deer. It shuffled by, staring straight ahead into nothingness. His brown fur was tainted with green rot and purple bloating. His legs were all but gone, leaving only bone left. The antlers were the only defining feature I could use to even confirm that he was a deer. His face was decayed. His teeth were fully exposed. And his eyes looked like they were eaten out. But a portion of it still remained in its sockets. I could smell the rot from here. It was disturbing to think about. That thing should be dead, Duncan whispered to me. I couldn't stop staring at it. Something about this deer seemed familiar but uncanny, like it shouldn't be walking around, or doing anything for that matter. Made me feel uneasy. To my horror, the deer snapped his head back to face me. Not Duncan, not the house. Me. We stared at each other for what seemed like forever before it shuffled away towards the forest. That's just not right. Duncan finalized before sitting back down. He went and fiddled around with his phone to try and get a signal. I slowly stepped back towards the couch and rested my hands on my head. Darkness enveloped me once again, and I began to think, as the snow suffocated us in the cramped house. I had a single realization. Something was wrong tonight. Hey, Duncan. Yeah, dude. I didn't answer. My mind was foggy. It was a weird sensation. There was a faint ringing in my ears. Felt like I had just woken up from a warm dream, or a comforting nightmare. I opened my mouth to say something. What do you think happened to the deer? Why was he so decayed? I asked him. Duncan shrugged as if to divert attention from the question. I don't know, he replied. I guess it must be a disease or something, like mange. Mange? Yeah, it's this sort of thing, or, well, disease, that rots a deer from the inside out. It's supposed to kill the deer in like a month, but I guess this one just got lucky or something. Makes sense. It always was a fighter, especially this year. Wait, what? I asked again. What do you mean? Did you see this deer before? Duncan stayed silent. My mind was dense now. I found it hard to breathe. My intake came out as a soft wheeze. I massaged my head to try and collect my thoughts. My skin felt like rubber. What was going on right now? It felt too normal. Duncan wasn't acting like his usual self. His usual self? What was that? Duncan asked. There was a hint of alarm in his voice, almost as if he saw a demon in the corner of the room. I didn't say anything. How did he? This time I didn't answer him. There was this unexplained tension between us. I could have sworn, through the darkness, that he was staring directly at me. I wasn't certain, but it was an instinct that sat roughly in the sane recesses of my mind. What was Duncan usually like again? What was his usual self? I couldn't remember. I felt like my hands were pushing my mind into a box or a corner of some kind. I know that sounds delirious. This all feels like I'm acting delirious. But this all just feels too normal. It feels too picturesque. Why hasn't Duncan said anything? There's been an awkward silence between us for a while. He should have said something, right? Unless he was still staring at me. I had a weird taste in my mouth. It tasted like metal. I took a deep breath and fought myself to try to look up, but I couldn't. It wasn't fear holding me back, but I don't know. Duncan, what was he doing here? Like, I know he was a friend, but what did I call him over for again? Hey, Duncan. No response. Why did you come here again? No response. I focused on the darkness delivered by my palms. I felt tired, confined. I distinctly remembered off the top of my head an explanation of the word terror. The certainty of danger, the acknowledgement that you were going to die, and the realization that you couldn't do anything about it. The word felt warmly familiar now. It felt certain. But it was just a thought, right? Yeah, Duncan is just on the phone waiting for Mom to come home, and I'll go to sleep and I'll wake up and forget this ever happened. Yeah, I'll forget. Reassured by this, I tore up from my prison of darkness. I expected to be in the living room, but danger. Emergency weather alert. Ice storm warning at 8:30 p.m. Stay indoors. Stay safe. The sound system exploded in a disturbing succession of beeps and drills. I closed my eyes and plugged my ears up silently. The room we were in was shrouded in darkness anyway, so I would assume Duncan wouldn't see me. I really hated those emergency alert warnings. It always reminded me of an alien invasion in movies and stuff. I always know that those stories aren't true, but they make me feel uneasy. The basement projector flickered a bit. It was definitely on the fritz. Wait a minute. This feels... Hey, Duncan. Yeah? I paused for a moment. My thoughts felt distant, as if someone had taken an open file of them and threw it over a busy highway. I slowly gathered them again and spoke. Have you ever gotten deja vu? I mean, sometimes, he answered. But scientifically it's called the Mange effect. The Mange effect? Yeah, you know. When you're seeing the same thing over and over again. It's like a spiritual entrapment or something. Is that really what it's called? Yeah, of course. Why would I lie to you? He said with a hint of aggression. I shook my head. I could have sworn I'd heard that before. Whatever. I just had that feeling right now is all. He nodded and stared directly into the warning system on the projector. I checked my phone to call my mom. As I scrolled through my contacts list, I realized that I spelled mom incorrectly. Kinda weird, but whatever. I called her and held the phone up to my ear. I heard a dial tone at the end of the line. Crap, I said. No service. Makes sense. The ice will mess with the internet like that, Duncan reasoned. He fiddled with his phone, doing something on it, but I was only interested in his face. It looked different. Not like he had an entirely different face. More like when you haven't seen someone in months, and you get a random dream of them. Sure, you know it's the same person, but their face is slightly different. The nose is the wrong shape, the eyes were a different color, that sort of thing. Except this was real life. Yeah, it was real life. Duncan instinctively darted his head around to face me. What? He said, somewhat aggressively. I didn't say anything. I shook my head and pointed up. You want to head upstairs and play Monopoly or something? His face was contorted to an unnerving frown. Something about that expression. It was different. It didn't look like a frown. It looked unnatural. I was jolted back to reality as Duncan nodded. Okay, he said blandly. His face immediately became docile again. As we walked, I noticed that the entire first story of the house was surrounded by snow. The level was almost covering the windows entirely. I looked around in a panic. I asked Duncan, how is Mom going to get back in? Should we shovel the snow out? Duncan shook his head and chuckled softly. No, silly. She's going to drive in. A bit of snow isn't a big deal. She'll be okay. I nodded slowly. and we took out the Monopoly board. Come to think of it, we never really played together before. Well, did we? I have a bit of a headache. It's getting hard to focus. Hey, idiot, stop thinking so hard and play the damn game, Duncan retorted. Wait, wasn't I pulling this out of the shelf? Why are we playing? I asked again. Just move the piece, genius, Duncan demanded. Confused, I moved my queen piece to place d5, juxtaposed against my rooks. We placed Duncan in a check. He sighed in annoyance and moved his queen to take out my bishop. I moved my rook back a pace to kill the queen. The check was broken, but only temporarily. He shook his head and emitted a low growl. I paid no attention to him. You know, they say chess is a mental game. You aren't playing football here. It isn't you versus your opponent, but your mental capacity to outthink them. I moved another rook to g5, and I scored a checkmate. I win, I gloated. I can tell, Duncan sighed. What now? I shrugged, not occupied by the chess game. My mind roamed freely. I started to pick up the chess pieces and clean up. Before seeing the board cover, why did it have a Monopoly logo on it? What were we supposed to be playing again? Can you stop that, please? Duncan said out loud. What? That thing you're doing. Stop it. I looked at him in confusion. You've been aggressive lately. What's the big deal? Never mind, Duncan said, immediately going back to a docile stance. Something wasn't right. This makes no sense. This is wrong. In the corner of my eye, I looked past a crack in the snowbank outside. There was a rotting deer. It looked familiar but uncanny, like it shouldn't be walking around, or doing anything for that matter. It made me feel uneasy. The deer ripped his head back to face me. Not Duncan. Not the house. Me. We stared at each other for what seemed like forever. Before he stumbled off, Duncan was silent again. That feeling of deja vu, that weird aha moment you get when you encounter it, that was going on overdrive in my brain. I've done this before. Suddenly the lights flickered out. It was pitch black. This wasn't right. I did this before. I did all of this before. How long have I been doing this? How long has Duncan been here? I knew one thing. I needed to leave. I needed to get out. Tiptoeing across the creaky floor, I jolted, my hands trembling, when I heard the whisper. Hello, friend. Duncan? I called out, before stumbling back into a soft chair. What's going on? Why is this happening to me? I heard a fist slam on the table. Stop thinking. An unholy voice brayed out. I shook my head. This made no sense. Mom should have been back by now. She was outside. This doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any... Danger. Emergency weather alert. Ice storm warning at 8:30 p.m. Stay indoors. Stay safe. The sound system exploded in a disturbing succession of beeps and drills. I closed my eyes and plugged my ears up silently. The room we were in was shrouded in darkness anyway, so I would assume Duncan wouldn't see me. I really hated those emergency alert warnings. It's always reminded me of an alien invasion in movies and stuff. I always know that those stories aren't true, but they make me feel uneasy. We were watching Toy Story in our home theater system upstairs in my room. I looked outside. Snow had fallen heavy tonight. The snow had piled up to cover all 2 stories of the house. The only view from my window was a bright white screen. The snow had taken everything outside. Duncan and I were the only ones left. We would suffocate in the snow in about an hour. That seems pointless. I remark at the warning label. It's all over now. Nothing matters anymore. The darkness enveloped both of us, but I could see that Duncan was nodding. He turned to face me. I could define the facial features on him. He was suffering from Mange's disease, so his face wasn't the best sight for sore eyes. Even through the dim light, I could see the bone exposed on his face. The smell of rot was evident in the room. I felt uneasy around him. What scared me the most, though, was that his expression was masked, covered in darkness. There was something primal about that. How I couldn't see his expression. I remembered learning that the reason we find masks so creepy is that we can't tell the expressions or intent of the wearer. You couldn't tell what he was going to do. You couldn't trust him. I knew I didn't trust Duncan. He knew it too. But it wouldn't matter anymore. Nothing did. There's nothing I can do. Nothing I could ever do anyway. Hey, Duncan. No response. Never mind.